Hi, everybody. It's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. So happy to have you with me today. And it's a busy day indeed. Sometimes I roll into my chair and I think, oh my God, will I make my own live show today? And I am here to head up the Plant-Based Business Hour. So much going on as the world heads back to their summits and their conferences and their in-person meetings. I'm so grateful to be back in person. And yet at the same time, I sure do love the efficiency of Zoom. But if you do want to meet in person, I would love to be in touch with you. Let me tell you where I'm going to be around the country. And hopefully we can connect the next Tuesday, I guess it is May 10th. I'll be in New York City at a Bloomberg Intelligence Plant-Based Investing Summit for all those finance people who are interested in learning about the new impact asset class that VegTech Invest has created, that new investment category that didn't exist before we started up, and that is the investment category of plant-based innovation and alternative proteins. We all know that we're talking about a mega trend. So anyways, I'll be in New York with Bloomberg Intelligence next Tuesday, so come see me there. Otherwise, I'll go to San Francisco May 18th for an innovation and investment summit, and then back to New York. I know it's crazy. In June 21st at the Future Food Tech Alternative Protein Summit, talking about alternative proteins, plant-based innovation, and investing all the months of May and June before we all break for summer. Hooray! Okay, so today on the Plant-Based Business Hour, let's get into it. We talk a lot about beef and chicken. That's all anyone's been talking about. Chicken and sausage and crumbles, but no one's talking about lamb until now. So let me bring on today's guest. He has an interesting background, but first we'll get to his real life as CEO right now of Black Sheep Foods. Sunny Kumar, thanks for being with me.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And I am so happy to talk to you because I can say that I believe it was in San Francisco at the Future Food Tech Conference. It might have even been that I got to try Black Sheep Foods, and it was my first ever plant-based lamb. And for those of you listening on audio right now, yes, you just did like your fists exploding from the top of your head. My mind was blown. Tell me first, how did you land on lamb as your original, the first product out of the gate? And then we're going to talk about taste.
Yeah, so we sort of started from first principles of like, why do we eat the meats that we do? And the realization was, it's not because they taste the best, it's because they fit into our supply chains quite nicely. So if you think about the pork, the beefs, or the chickens of the world, the reason why we eat them is because they can be domesticated, they can be scaled up, yet nowhere does anyone talk about taste in that equation, right? It's all about how big can you get them, how little feed can you give them, how little water can you give them. So what we did was we sort of went back to first principles and we're like, hey, okay, if that's the reason why people are eating these foods, what if there was a new world and it's plant and cell-based, what would you actually eat? And the aha moment came is when we started realizing there's a lot of these polarizing foods out there. So lamb is polarizing, duck is polarizing, right? So some people really love lamb, some people really hate lamb. And our whole take was actually, the reason why they're so polarizing is the best versions of them are great and the worst versions of them are really bad. So our thing was, let's go to these meats that are unloved and kind of take the essence out of them, make them really great because we don't have to attach to sort of the way that they are in the animal kingdom and bring them to market. And so we started with lamb and it's been really exciting to see because what people have told us is, I don't like lamb, but I like your product. And it's sort of proving out that hypothesis, right? Because we don't have to put those negative compounds in there that taste bad. We put only the good flavors.
So much to unpack there. So as we talked about in the green room before, this is meant to be a knowledge drop for everybody. So I hope you'll roll with it when I say like, I don't know if I really say like the supply chains are so great for animal agriculture. I think I would say, and let's get into it. I think I would say like, distribution is great because everyone is bought into, well, this is the thing we're going to sell and put in front of your face and kind of make it cheap with subsidies. And it's the thing you can afford that is really easy to get your fingers on. Maybe it tastes good, maybe it doesn't, but hey, this is what you're buying, basically. I would say it's really hard on the supply chains for the points that you made, really like in comparison, a Beyond Meat burger is 99% less water, 93% less land, 90% less greenhouse gas emissions, and 46% less energy. So you see how hard animal agriculture is on the supply chain and how wasteful and detrimental it is to our planet. We'll get into that in just a second. But it's what everyone's bought into. So I love that you're here to disrupt that and say that there's a better way in terms of taste. On your website, and of course, I really recommend everyone go to blacksheepfoods.com so you can find out where you can get your hands on some plant-based lamb, the first and only plant-based lamb to my knowledge in existence. Is that right?
Yes.
So that's pretty awesome. And he's right about taste. He's not lying, folks. It's awesome. So go to blacksheepfoods.com and check that out. But on your website, you talk a lot about the science behind the taste.
Yep.
So not just that you want to, let's dive into that taste perspective, because on the website, you're talking about how, animals taste the way they do because what they eat, and you guys have kind of unlocked that so that you can bring that to plant-based lamb. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I'll go a little bit into the science and sort of stop me or ask me any follow-up questions for any further explanations. But essentially, when animals are grazing and foraging freely, they get these compounds called branched-chain fatty acids accumulating in their system. So let's say if you had a particularly harsh winter, you'll have a little bit more BCFAs. It's a way for them to sort of signal to the world how their health is, right? And if they've been in a water drought or if they're eating a particular type of shrubbery. So what we've done is we've understood what happens in terms of bioaccumulation of these BCFAs, depending on, if it's too much water or too little water or too hot or too cold. And what we found is certain conditions, bad BCFAs develop. So let's say if you didn't get enough water, you'll get these BCFAs inside their system, particularly in lamb, that are reminiscent of like musty or barnyard, right? Because the animal is not in the best state possible. And so if you think about evolution, the reason why this happened is if you're searching for food, the first thing is you look at it. The second thing is you smell it. And the last thing is you put it in your mouth. And the compounds and the flavors that we're working with are very much perceived in the nose. So it's for you to be able to understand very quickly, like, oh, get away from here. This lamb is not healthy. Like it's gone through some bad stuff. And these are detectable parts per million, parts per trillion. So they're very, very like potent, and you're very sensitive to them. So for us, what we did was we used analytical chemistry to understand these compounds. And then when we first started, we were like, okay, put all of these in there because we want to recreate lamb. But then we were like, wait, why are we putting the bad stuff in? Why are we putting in musty and barnyard? And so what we've done now is put only the good stuff and really amp it up. And so when people, one of the best compliments we've gotten is like, hey, it tastes like a lamb chop that's ground up, because a lamb chop is very clean and it just gives you that pure lamb flavor. And that's sort of what we've done. We've taken the best of the good stuff, put it in, left all the bad stuff out. And so we took this animal that's polarizing and people are like, oh, I don't know if I like it. Well, you like lamb, you don't like certain compounds in lamb. And so we've gotten rid of that aspect of things. So that's sort of the science behind it. It's a lot of, and these compounds are 400 such compounds could give you the taste of lamb. So it was really like, how do we whittle down and get to the key ones that are delicious?
Mm-hmm. So much to unpack there too. I think that's fascinating, and I want to get into your scientific team and how big you guys are. 400 compounds is, a lot to go through, and how long it took you to kind of nail this down and hone in. But I love what you're saying about you're taking that taste of lamb and making it better. We talk a lot on this show about the innovation arc of animal agriculture, and it's kind of gone as far as it's going to go. It's at the end of its innovation curve, whereas here we're just beginning, and the bright light, in addition to all the environmental benefits and personal health benefits, animal welfare benefits, obviously greenhouse gas emissions benefits, is that you can be better than the actual original product.
Yeah. So domesticated animals just aren't that flavorful, and so they kind of level off, right? And again, yes, they're environmental sort of nuisance. And then you have gamier animals, which the best of game is like delicious and bad game is terrible. For us, we actually are one of the few companies that could, compared to our benchmark animal, we can be better than them, which I think it's hard because other people are just trying to aim to a benchmark of domesticated animals. And for us, it's like, wait, we could go beyond that, which I think is really exciting for Black Sheep.
Yeah, and it's also very exciting from the taste profile perspective. I think of my own experience. I mean, I had always been working through my head like, how can I not participate in factory farming? I know what it is. I'm an adult now. I'm no longer a kid. I don't think like, old MacDonald had a farm is how the world really works. I mean, I get it and I don't want to be a part of it. But then there was that taste thing. Like I remember the last time I had a lamb chop and I was like, never ever again, that gristle, that gross part of a lamb chop is so disgusting. And then I was like, okay, I'm only going to stick to gyros because I really like gyros really for like the flavorings. Then I remember I had a bad gyros and I was like repulsive. I won't like replicate my stomach reaction, but I was just like, never again. Like I don't know what was wrong with that gyros, but it was just, and I remember having the same experience with a Mexican burrito with chicken. And I was like, I'm poisoning myself here. Like you talk about the smell and the things that your body's telling you, like this is awful. But here we don't even have that. So you're getting the best of the best, which is so exciting. Okay, but to get the best of the best, you have a team of scientists. So how big is your team?
So our team is 17 people with 12 dedicated to science. So we
Wow.
work heavily, on that side of things. With the focus, and we divide it into sort of two parts. One is texture and one is flavor. The flavor team works on, understanding, I'm going to use game in like quotes because there's game meats are a mosaic of delicious sort of tastes that we all kind of just couple into one thing because we don't understand them. So we just call like duck game, boar game, goat game, lamb game, but they all taste very differently. But we have one team sort of dedicated to that, understanding the meatiness that comes from it and the BCFAs that give it their flavor. Then we have a texture team that focuses on making the perfect sort of mouthfeel and the fattiness and the non-gristly fat that we have for our lamb. And then lastly, we have a strain engineering team that focuses on how do you take these compounds and cultivate them through precision fermentation. So that's sort of the three parts of the company.
Fascinating. When you talk about game or gaminess in this general way, I want plant game. Like I think like, okay, because there's great taste to plants, and I'm all about the plant game from here on out. I thought that gaminess in animals was meant to be like a bad thing, or no?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because we don't understand these. Oh, so just stepping back, our industry funds through taxes, lobbying, grants, right? They fund governments, and they advocate for certain things. And then governments fund universities who do a lot of research into domesticated animals. So this whole thing that we're focusing on, we have to do a lot of primary research because there's no research out there. So there's a vicious little triangle that we have going here, right? Lobbyists, governments through grants to universities. And guess what? A lot of the people in the plant-based world come from the University of Idaho. And we have people like that as well, right? So, and also what you're finding is, and the reason why we're the world's first in doing lamb is because people are buying their flavors and their colorants from companies that provide the same sort of thing to animal agriculture. Mm-hmm. And so the reason why it was so hard to do this, and stepping back, if we were to 3 years ago when we started this, that's crazy to bring something to market, and something that takes 3 years, right? Especially in the plant-based world where people are pumping out new things every year. And the reason is, if you're using the same colors and flavors from these things, it's very easy to recreate these animals. But game meats are just inherently different because no one in that sort of triangle is like, oh, in addition to learning about how to grow chickens quickly, we should also learn about what makes goat, right? Like there's no reason for that. And so weirdly, we as a company have had to do a lot of primary research as well. And we have to actually take this one giant word, gamey, and actually understand, okay, we can't use this vocabulary. We have to understand what makes goat, and lamb. And we got to unbuckle from this large scale, oh, it's all gamey. That's just the current world. But there are actually delicious flavors there that when you could bring it back to people are like, oh, of course I would like this over a chicken or a pork or a beef. And that's what we're noticing. When people try our product, there's no mention of environment. There's no mention of what ingredients do you use, even though, we're soy free, and like we try to really think about all that. All they say is like, wow, that flavor is insane. Like, how did you recreate that? I hate lamb, but I like yours. And it's fun to see, because of our focus on the taste, that when you hear feedback, it's all about that taste. But it is decoupling game from the animal and actually understanding what makes that animal delicious and which ones are actually delicious. So we have to also, I don't eat meat, but we have to like try a lot of these things. Like, what does camel meat taste like?
Ah.
And right, like we have to like, I've never had it, and we're like, is it good? Is the essence good? Because if it has bad notes, now we're like, oh, we know we can get rid of those bad notes. So it's like, having to also then try yak and moose and all these like crazy animals, and you're like, man, I never thought I would have beaver to like understand where to take this company. But that's been the exciting part.
Well, and that's so interesting too. Again, as we talk about the innovation curve with animal agriculture, you are limited to, and I found that once I went vegan, how limited I was as a meat eater, because I was having the same like ham and cheese sandwich every day. You have like your chicken, and it's not even chicken in the breath that the animal kingdom, nature kingdom intended. There used to be like 300 kinds of chicken. Now we mass and growth produce, or whatever the word is, only one kind of chicken. And then those chickens are just grown so quickly they can't even walk. It's just like true bastardization. And I can say that because this is my own podcast. I can use that word, of what it really means to be nature or animal at all. And in fact, the animals, as I understand it, are in such poor condition. And of course, the condition impacts taste, as you are aptly explaining to us, that even a lot of the animal products have additives back in, be it saline, or I've seen some that add rosemary for color or what have you. So, we're done there, I guess is my point. We are done innovating. That we've taken us to the end of its line. And so now we go to the next step. But as you and your team focus so much on taste and that science behind taste, I'm wondering, are you also a B2B company helping other companies manage the taste profile? Because I think I saw that on your website as well.
Yes. So for us right now, what we're doing is, it's weird. We first started off saying, okay, we could create these amazing flavors. And then we're like, who would we sell it to, right? Like, so we have to kind of create the demand ourselves. And we're like, actually, if they're delicious, we should just go to market with them. We shouldn't be scared of like, oh, launching lamb because it's alien. And then what we find now is people actually view plant-based as a separate category, and they want diversity in plant-based. So when we sort of go to them and we say, look, try plant-based lamb, people go, this is delicious. They don't say it's a lamb equivalent. They say, oh, this is just a better way of eating more flexitarian meals. And that's what we've been noticing from customers. So, but in the future, you could see us like, sell these compounds and flavors to other companies, particularly so because the two big areas that are going to experience a demographic dividend, which essentially means that, their economies their populations are very young, and they're going to experience rapid growth. So China was, experiencing a demographic dividend from the 90s till now, and you notice sort of what happened to their economies. India is experiencing a demographic dividend now, which means a vast majority of its population is young. Large number of countries in Africa are experiencing a demographic dividend now, which means they're going to experience rapid growth. And so this is sort of a ticking time bomb that we also see in terms of environmental damage, because lamb and goat are very exhausting meats. And the countries that eat them predominantly are in these places, which are very young populations who are going to experience rapid economic growth. So getting ahead of that and saying like, hey, we could provide you with the best flavors that even you can't even get from the animal versions of these things. And then we don't care how it's delivered, right? Because it's in America, you could have this whole cold supply chain that it's like nice and frozen the whole way through. But in other countries, if you want to put it in a retort bag that's like pressure and heated up and it's like sterile and it's shelf stable, and you want to put our flavor compounds in there, we're not going to be like, no, let's not do that, because we want to have end-to-end ownership of it. We're more than happy to sort of supply that to those places as well.
So I think that's really fascinating. Let's talk about that population growth around the world. When I think of plant-based and the growth of plant-based, I often think of the West. So we'll say Europe, the UK, Germany, and North America. But we have the population growth happening in India and in Africa. And as we go from a population explosion from 7.7 billion to 9.7 billion, according to the UN, but we're not going to get more land and water, which is what we need to continue our food supply system as we know it, because animal agriculture being so wasteful of both of those. So it's those countries, Africa or continent of Africa, and then India, and maybe China, although China's being very proactive with its 5-year agricultural plan to bring itself other options like cultivated meat. Those places around the world are going to be greatly impacted by food insecurity. But I don't think of them as embracing plant-based or even knowing that that exists. That's probably my own ignorance. So the question to you is, what is the openness, willingness, adoption curve of plant-based items in, let's say, Africa? India maybe has a history with vegetarianism, but what about Africa?
Yeah, I think the general thing is, and I'll take a moment to step back a little bit. I think
Thanks.
when the plant-based industry benchmarks to animals, right, and they say essentially, hey, we're trying to recreate chicken, you essentially have given your power away to the animal agriculture industry, right? So when you say, hey, I'm creating chicken and I'm benchmarking to domesticated chickens and I'm buying flavors from the company that makes it for domesticated chickens, you essentially, it's a very hard battle then to change. Because then you go to a customer and you're like, hey, you want to try this plant-based chicken that tastes just like chicken? And they go, why don't I just eat the chicken? If you're like trying to get to this, why would I do that? So for us, the key realization is the number one thing that matters to customers is taste, and the number two thing that matters is price, right? And so we have to become better than animal agriculture, and we have to become better not on environmentalism, because we care about that, but most customers don't. Not on even health benefits, because we care about that, but not all customers do. It's really on the two metrics that actually matter to a customer, which is taste and price. And the big thing is, as water and land become more scarce, and lamb and goat take the most land, lamb and goat take a lot of water, similar to cattle, and they emit same amount of methane and CO2, if not more. Then what you're essentially saying is the cost is not going to level, it's going to actually continue rising, right? Because if those things become scarce and the inputs become scarce, and the cost is going to go up. So on a cost basis, we could win, and that's why we're focusing on strain engineering and actually doing it internally to reduce those costs. But the second thing that we actually win on, which if you're benchmarking domesticated animals, you have a hard time winning on, is taste. And so if you get those two parts of the equation right, people don't actually care what the substrate is. And this goes back to our internal stuff where, we thought, oh, we're going pea protein, and we actually like the texture of soy and all that stuff, but we realized, oh, marketing wise, it's bad. No one cares. People only talk about taste and they talk about price, right? Those are the two things that actually matter to customers. So I think from that perspective, we know that's why I went with this self-stable, some sort of a retort package, because you could get that to be low cost. You can provide really amazing flavors because they're volatile, but they would just, under pressure and heat, if they're in a bag or a can, they would just come back down. And then people want just a good tasting thing that's cheap. Now you could imagine, like, if you're on a shelf in a country in Africa, or like in Nigeria or something, or like in India, as long as you're providing a really good mouthfeel and chew and these amazing flavors, and it's for a low cost, that's actually the thing that we should keep our eyes to. Everything else is sort of like secondary, and people, they'll do good things without having to do good things, right? Because they'll do it because they're like, oh yeah, it tastes good. It's as simple as that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love that. Ultimately, we don't need to overthink it.
You don't need to overthink it.
You really don't. Yeah, it's just, does it taste good, and let's move on. And then secondarily, is it the same amount or less? And exactly. I think, as you say, as these prices become more expensive, land, water, et cetera, the time even it takes to make, make quote unquote an animal, you're talking weeks, months, years. So all the prices are in our favor when we scale. What's interesting to me is you say, well, people don't care. Is it soy? Is it wheat? Is it whatever? Pea protein? Is it animal? People don't care. Does it taste good? I actually find that industry doesn't care either. They don't care
Zero.
about taste. They just want
Zero.
to make money. And if it's animals or if it's pea protein, they don't care. They're
They don't
making
care.
plant-based goods or they're making animal goods. And if
Exactly.
they can relieve that investment risk, there's a lot of risk to being involved with pandemics, antibiotic resistance,
Exactly.
being the
Bird
culprit
flu.
of greenhouse gas emissions. Yes. They could alleviate that cost, because with every risk, there's a cost. Great. Plant-based. So I think that's very interesting that the consumer
they're
and
winning on
industry.
both ends. They're winning on both ends, which is the frustrating part for me, because we get flavors all the time just to sort of benchmark ourselves and sort of see where it is, and you're kind of like, man, this tastes like X, and it's kind of sad because you're like, they're buying all the stuff that industry, animal agriculture buys, and it's a way of like, well, who's actually winning? It's like the big players who are always in animal agriculture.
Right.
They're the ones who are winning in this space as well. And you're like, well, the best bet on plant-based is actually a flavor house that supplies it to both like animal and plant-based, because they win. They win regardless. They just win on the future of protein. They don't. It's not necessarily. They don't care who wins, right? And which is kind of sad for us, but. And so we like end to end own our own flavors. We do everything in house because we're like, no, we're not gonna tether to this world, because A, it's gonna be very hard to differentiate, but B, like, you don't want to support that sort of old school industries which are capitalizing on this new trend and almost greenwashing their activities, and you're like, oh, damn it.
Thank you for this. Wholeheartedly agree. But it's why we're out there innovating, creating, coming up with these new things to be, as you say, tastier or better. But I wonder your perspective on people do what they know. So even sometimes if it tastes better, is it sort of like too new and novel for people? What's your thought on like, oh, we can make it taste better, but people just want what they know?
Great questions. Yeah, so we have data on this as well. So the plant-based market bifurcates really into two. So one is the older generation. Their doctors have told them, hey, stop eating meat, a lot of cholesterol. If you're going to eat, like if you want a hamburger, kind of have the Impossible Burger or the Beyond Burger, right? Because no cholesterol, lower saturated fat, yada, yada, yada. And then the younger generation, which actually cares about environment, global warming, and so they're the more flexitarian generation. Now, what we found is once people try the product, so we did a survey with Moonshot Collective, which David from Ocean Hugger, I'm sure he's been on the show, runs or used to run. I know he has a new venture. But essentially what we found is that once you sort of try plant-based, your propensity to try other plant-based becomes really high, right? So it's like, the way I like to look at it is, let's say if I tried the first potato chip, my propensity to try like barbecue potato chips becomes really high, or like sour cream and onion, or whatever the hell other variations you want to give. So the thing about it is the younger generation actually really values like new experiences, ethnic cuisines, and that's why Mediterranean and Indian are like one of the fastest growing segments in America. And so they're on board, right? It's not a hard sell to the converted. For the older generation, once they are in the ecosystem of like plant-based, their propensity to try our product goes, I think, above 65%. It's like 70 something percent. So it's never about us. It's about, am I gonna commit to a flexitarian lifestyle? And if that choice has been made, then we are a tasty alternative in that sort of ecosystem, as opposed to being like, oh my God, is it lamb? They don't care. People are just like, does it taste good? Again, it seems like I'm, being a politician and going back to it always just comes back to one metric. It's a 80 something, I think it's 88% of people make their choice based off of taste, 70% on price, and then everything else is like 55% or below. And it's always those two metrics, right? Like, can I get it? Does it taste good? Is it like reasonably priced? And I'm in.
And you have a pretty clean label. I was showing, for those listening on podcast, I was showing the nutrition profile here on LinkedIn where we are live, but I'll bring back up the page, and I think we can see the ingredients. Does anybody ever push back on the ingredients? Every once in a while I'll hear like, oh, but animals are natural. And I have to say, well, stop, hold the phone, because there's nothing natural about animal factory farms. That's like the least natural you could be. And then so many additives are added because the animals are so sick, not just antibiotics and hormones, but saline and salt and other things because,
Exactly.
they're just not well. But as we look at your ingredients list, we have texturized pea protein, high oleic, sunflower oil, refined coconut oil, cocoa butter. Any pushback on ingredients, or what are people saying about the nutritional profile?
Just a quick point of clarification: the sunflower oil, because of the war, and 80% of sunflower oil comes from Russia.
Yeah.
So we have to switch that with canola oil and
Okay.
other sort of mixed blended. But aside from that, everything else is the same. And we don't really get a lot of pushback. I think the biggest sort of boogeyman in investors' eyes, weirdly, is methylcellulose, because
I know.
again, they think like everyone wants the health benefits, right? And so I think because they're probably more healthier than I don't actually know than the general population, they're like, oh, what about methylcellulose? You're going to get rid of it. And we made a partnership with Equinam out of Israel. Yeah, they do Mendelian genetics pretty much on like crack. So they're using like AI to do that, and we're trying to find proteins that mimic the thermal irreversibility of methylcellulose. So for those who don't know, methylcellulose, it's a wonder sort of ingredient because when you heat it up, it actually becomes stronger, and when it cools down, it kind of becomes softer. And whereas like if you use gums or anything like that, when you heat them up after a certain point, they kind of melt. And so if you remember the original Beyond Burger, you would put it on the grill and it would kind of fall through. And then they switched to methylcellulose. So everyone in the industry uses it because of that very unique property. We're trying to find proteins that could do the same thing. And the beauty of if you could get to a protein that does the same thing is when it heats up, it will gel and become really strong. But then when it cools down, proteins don't then denature and like kind of, well, denature is not the right word, but they don't become soft. So the only pushback that we get is on the methylcellulose. Personally, in America, there's that huge issue against soy. We like soy. I think it's actually the future. Given global warming, soy yields are actually expected to go up by 5 to 7%. So it's like as a future tech in terms of price stability, soy is amazing. But we use pea protein because marketing wise, people seem to prefer that. So just full disclosure on that. But
yeah, I hope that doesn't stay. There's so many health benefits to soy. I mean, of course, a more processed anything is not what you want. You want soy in its most whole state, like anything that's not specific to soy. But, just the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, as well as Dr. Michael Greger, all talk about the benefits of soy, having phytoestrogens and being, great in protein, and then the functionality of being able to work with it. And then, right now it is a monocrop. So, got to keep an eye on that for sure. And it would be great to see more novel proteins come into the marketplace so we can divest from corn, wheat, and soy and with monocropping in mind. But that will happen as companies like Ingredion and other ingredient companies are pushing beyond those. So I think we'll see prices come down, wars aside, which of course affect pricing, the sad situation in Ukraine. You talk about its impact on sunflower oil as well as wheat and other things. But, political squabbles, and that's a whole nother show about how food security and food independence is really a question of national security and political legitimacy. I'm writing an article about that right now. So that's a whole other topic. But that aside, I think we will see more novel proteins. But soy is wonderfully nutritious, isn't accurately negative. It's not negative as misportrayed in the media, and then it has this functionality and cost benefit. But as we talk about how really, let's not overthink it, it's all about taste. It comes down and reminds me to like who people are and who people think they are two totally different things. So everybody says, well, it's my health and planetary health. And I do believe in those studies. I do. People are registering planetary health. That's what I take from those studies. But when people tell me like, oh, well, planetary health maybe is why people are changing their diets, I think like, I think that's why people want to change their diets. But then it comes back to really who they are. And I'm a creature of this as well. So I understand. Okay. I wonder, we talk so much about lamb, but you've mentioned other products as well. Are you going to be branching out, and what's in the works?
Yeah. So similar to lamb, when we found this sort of huge amount of polarization for us, that's oh my God, that means there's greatness and there's terribleness if we get rid of Miss Hyde, Dr. Jekyll, one of the two. You create like this, beautiful animal replicant or mimetic that people love, right? So we did that with lamb. We took the best of lamb, and people love it. Lamb haters love it, lamb lovers love it, and people who never had lamb are like, whatever, this is great. So awesome, we did that. What's next, right? And so for us, what we're finding is duck is also very polarizing. So there's three reasons why people dislike duck over chicken, and they have nothing, or why it's polarizing. So first is the color, which if you imagine for us, we don't have to worry about that because duck has this like almost like grayish, reddish hue.
Brown,
So
red,
people,
yeah, like a.
yeah, it's like, oh, I don't want to eat
Yeah.
that. Second, people don't think they're getting good value when they buy duck because there's a lot of fat on it. So with chicken, you're like, oh, I get more meat for the amount of fat on it, even though the fat is what tastes good, but whatever, park that aside. People who buy duck are like, well, I'm wasting a lot of money on fat. I don't know what the actual value is. It's covered in this thing. I'm going to stay away from it. And then lastly, which is the most important, good duck is great. Bad duck is terrible, right? So there's a volatility in the supply chain you want to get rid of. And it's because it has like these medium chain fats, which go rancid very quickly. So good duck is exceptional and like smoky and like umami and like delicious. And ducky, I don't want to say ducky because it sounds kind of reductive, but ducky. And then bad duck is rancid, fishy, like too fatty, like. And for us, when we see that, we go, okay, well, all these variables that are negative about duck, we could easily sort of in the plant-based or cell-based world kind of get rid of. And the parts that are really good about duck, we could exemplify and like sort of highlight and tune up. And so for us, the next product is, okay, 6 billion chickens are eaten in the world. Chicken is clearly inferior to duck in terms of good duck and the taste. How do we then move people off or increase we always like to think about, baby steps, increase the cadence of flexitarianism in population. And for us, it's like, okay, if we take the best of duck and we could do that, let's attack chicken with that. So for lamb, we kind of attack beef with that. For duck, we'll attack chicken with that. And then we have, we're working on something for the swine, the domesticated swine, which we think is also going to, we can provide a better sort of pork, right? So we have a better red meat, a better poultry, chicken alternative, and then we're going to have a better swine, pork alternative. And that's how we view the market.
So I think I lost you along the way. Are you saying that you're going to put out a chicken product that tastes like duck? I think I lost you. Tell me again where you're going.
We're going to put out a duck product that competes against chicken.
I see. In taste or in price or
taste?
Or no.
Taste.
In taste,
it's going to taste like duck, but it's going to be the world's best duck. So like right now, it's the world's best lamb, and it goes against beef. We're going to have the world's best duck that goes against chicken.
So when you say go against or becomes a chicken, you mean in terms of the adoption curve and
exactly.
the amount of
let me explain. So just real quick, flavors plus shapes equals meat. Like put very like elemental level, right? Flavor, so chicken plus nugget shape equals chicken nugget, right? So for us, what we're understanding and going through this process is that the shapes actually have a lot of infrastructure, both on the supply side, right? Co-packers, dyes, sausage filling machines, yada, 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 that exists. And on your side and my side, there's a lot of infrastructure, right? So nuggets go in ovens, hamburgers go in buns, hot dogs could hold sausages. So there's a lot of infrastructure everywhere. We are not in the trying to make you redo infrastructure business. So the only thing that we could actually change is this flavor aspect of things, right? And so we kind of done it with lamb too. Like lamb plus burger equals lamb burger, and it will go against everywhere else that you eat burgers in, and traditionally burgers are in the beef kingdom. And so similarly, when you say, okay, how do we attack chickens and where are chickens mostly found in? They're found in like these sort of right now unstructured meat products like nuggets, tenders, even ground chicken. Then, what we change is this, we take away the chicken and we put in the world's best duck. So you say shapes, we keep the same. So, hey, mom or dad who's feeding their child, you could give them chicken nuggets, plant-based chicken nuggets, or you could give them the world's best tasting duck nuggets. What are you going to choose, right? And what we're finding is like, if you give people that choice, they'll say, I'll choose these delicious duck nuggets, right? Because you want to just make a good experience for your son or daughter, or like whatever that may be. So that's how we sort of view it. The shapes can't change, infrastructure exists on that, but the flavors can, and that's where we want to become experts in. So
I think this is so interesting because ultimately it comes down to choices, and consumers want choices. Just go to the bread aisle and you'll be like, oh my God, there's sourdough gluten-free, there's rye, there's wheat with honey, or, hopefully Melly Bio soon, or, there's like bread it's sliced, it's not sliced, it's a baguette, no, it's a different shape. And you see that people really want choices. And I think people will begin to realize that on strictly traditional meat and dairy, their choices were actually quite limited. Some things very limited. Some things are subsidized, and a couple things make it down the distribution path, and you have a very small choice. And here you're actually giving consumers an enormous choice.
There's 7 billion people, about to be 9.5 billion people. There's no way a majority of them like chicken. That'd be a ridiculous thing.
Interesting.
If you're like, hey, you know what? Sonny, you were wrong. Most of us just like chicken. Go the hell back. This is fine by us. That's not going to happen, right? And that's why the hard work for us is actually going out, and that's what we're using, sort of heuristics and like kind of find data to like figure out what the next best meats are. And right now our thing is like take polarizing meats, because that means people have already shown that they love them, right? Like lamb has a cult following almost, and our lamb has a cult following almost. So we're using that, but then afterwards you can imagine that's why we have to try these things ourselves, and we have to kind of become tastemakers. It's like, is camel at its very essence actually good? And in a population set of 9 billion people, will X hundreds of millions or even billions of people actually like camel? And our hypothesis is is there a universality to taste, in which case we will possibly fail. But I don't think that's the case, because even salt is branded now, right? So people, if you're noticing these things between salt, we're pretty sure that in your protein selection, you're not going to be like, no, I want it to be the big three. You're going to be like, as long as I could use my infrastructure, which is spices, recipes, and machines, and like shapes where I could put this in, like starches, like rice or wheat or bread, I will be okay with experimenting and trying and like eating these things that taste good, right? And so our challenge is actually, first, we're trying to make it easier by going to these polarizing things, but our challenge is, what the hell is the best tasting foods out there, and how do we sort of recreate them? And it's a fun challenge. I think that's why the team is so motivated. They're like, oh my God, we get to try yak and see if there's like an element of yak that's like universal.
Well, I love that we're having this conversation, because so far the plant-based industry has gone down the path of being an analog, trying to be the plant-based exact version. But what if we went the opposite direction and we said, you're doing beef, whatever, we can do moose and tiger and camel and yak and own that. And from there, as we gain consumer trust, and they say, well, I really love black sheep yak. I don't know if you'll remain black sheep foods if you're not doing sheep, but
our challenge we struggle with.
Okay, right.
But the name wasn't the best name. But
yeah, I really love BSF yak. And now they then go to BSF. I've just renamed you. I should not do that. Black Sheep Foods burger. Like you might find them converting to your burger because you got them for the shape, but because you introduced them to moose or something. I don't know.
We're driving out, Elizabeth. Just took 42 minutes, but we're here now. We're both here now. Yeah, exactly. They convert to the shape, and then if there's a level, so in the future, the animal doesn't matter, the brands matter. And so if they trust BSF or they trust Impossible or they trust Beyond, then they say, you will make the best shape for me, right? And you kind of already see that happening with Beyond, where it was like, more meaty. What the fuck does that mean? But it's just like, it's more of it. And you're like, cool, I'm in, Beyond.
I'm in, right? Yeah,
I trust you. I like it. It's cool. You want to make it more meaty? Go ahead, man. Like,
yeah.
You've done your homework.
And it is cool because, again, we talk about that innovation curve. It's more meaty while they're bringing down saturated fat, and it still has no cholesterol, no trimethylene monoxide, no antibiotics, no hormones, and it has some fiber. But you're bringing down the fat, you're bringing down the sodium, and it's more meaty. So it's like just better and better.
So I'm trusting you because I didn't think it was less meat. Well, like I wasn't actively, because I'm a consumer. I'm not actively like, that's not what I spend my time on. But I trust you because. And that's why I think the two things that are ingredients to success for the future are a heavy focus on R&D and then great brands, right? And that's why I like the Black Sheep name. We're kind of like, okay, is it the Black Sheep name and the formats that are important? Or is it the Black Sheep name and the animals? Is it like Duck by Black Sheep Foods? Or is it like Nuggets by Black Sheep Foods? And you trust us. And we're not doing this, but imagine the future where you're like, hey, one year it might be something, and then we create an amazing experience for you. The next year it might be ostrich flavors. And you're like, man, every time I try it, it's like amazing and it's unique. And I love the experience of going to Black Sheep. And you get to play with your food, right? Like it's it's not going to be the same old chicken. It's going to we get to sort of control that. Or it might be like hints of duck with a little back end of ostrich to make like this crazy profile that you can't even get from animal agriculture because you can't breed like ostriches and ducks together. And so it's where do you want to focus your efforts? Is it the flavors? But then how do you sort of say that? Do you still benchmark to animals? Because at some point it becomes pointless to do that. It's just like, let us create that for you, right? Let us make more meaty, whatever the hell that means.
Right. So then you got to figure out to the consumer, what does that mean and what do they want? And on the same subject, but on a different one, so we should probably talk after this podcast, but there seems to be some kind of marketing opportunity here as well. When you think about, animal crackers, what if you made all those I don't want to go down a pipeline that's not helpful for you, but there's animals that are very recognizable, that children spend a lot of time with, that everybody knows, that were unfortunately either in a circus or they were part of their Garanimals clothes growing up, or they were part of Old MacDonald, or they were part of those animal crackers or the Barnum and Bailey cookies, or there's all these exotic animals that people know. And I don't know, there's something there as you decide to, there's something there, and yet at the same time you have to hone down. You can't take on the whole world at the same time. So you like while you're in the creative process, the world is your oyster and you can take it in any direction. And then probably your studies have shown you like how far people are willing to go to try ostrich duck. I don't know, like.
Yeah, and I think we're proving it out with lamb now. Like a lot of the people who try us are not, or lion. Thanks, Tom. Like just gonna bark that. I actually don't know what a lion tastes like, but it'd be interesting. I don't know where the line ethically is of me eating a lion for science, but we'll pass that bridge when we get there. But essentially, what we're finding is people who try our lamb haven't tried. Some people haven't tried lamb, and they want variety. And so the thing that we have to always benchmark to is it just has to taste good. And the hard part, that this is where the taste making element comes in. We got lucky. I think we have like 3 or 4 super tasters in the company of 17, which is a really high percentage. And it's, and now we're looking for like more of these master apprentice flavorists, because we realize what our strengths are. And it's like, the traditional flavor houses aren't going to do this, right? Because they're going to cater to industry, and hopefully they do, but that's sort of their prerogative. And for us, it's like, well, we could do this and go. It's a land grab out there. There's white space to be had there, and let's go capture what makes beautiful tasting meats that aren't currently commercial. And it might be lamb. I was joking, Tom, but yeah, it might be lamb. But then it becomes a supply chain of lamb and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating about where to take this, and that you're a flavor house, and that you're not limiting what you can be and what you need to make. And I think in the end, you'll be rewarded for that from customers. But we have the retail customer, and then we have food service. How is food service reacting to your lamb? And then I would think food service would be very open to duck. There's so many Asian possibilities there with dumplings, et cetera. So tell me how food service is welcoming you or not.
No, they love it. I mean, we went to a 2-star Michelin chef, and after one tasting, he was on board, right? But the cool thing is, so chefs are the original food scientists. The minute he tried our product, he was like, "Can you do goat?" He's like, "Because I try to get goat here, and it's just so hard to get goat." But
can I ask who this chef was?
Yeah, it's Shri from Matan. So he's the only 2-star Michelin Indian chef in America. just like after his first, and when we're doing this, we did this for 3 years. It was about 2 and change that we went to go see him. And at that time, we knew we had something, because you would just see people's ears perk up, because they would just like try it, and they would like, their face would enliven, and it's a beautiful feeling, because that's the beauty of food. It's not, you can't hide it, right? Like there's no like, try this software program, and they're like, oh, it's good. It's all going on up here. It's like, it's visceral, it's primal, it's animal. And it creates a connection. And so he's been helping us the whole way through. He gives us feedback, because to him, that's another thing to try stuff with. And I think for chefs, we're also like, using heuristics and what data is available, because we try to do it in a data-driven manner. Also, a great thing to do is like ask butchers and chefs which animals they love. And universally, like our chef he's French trained. He's like, if I could put duck fat on everything, and he's like, I do. Like, I make my omelets with duck fat. Like, he eats like, yeah. So he's like, just like, for him, they also give you a good feedback loop of like, okay, we should be focusing on duck next, because it is something that, inspires these like culinary masters. And so it must be a good tasting meat, right? And so, the chefs love it. They get to experiment with it. They get to make it their own. We're in a bunch of restaurants now where the chefs are having an amazing time with it. And I think, as we go forward, for us, it's always about creating that sort of customer delight. And for us, our customers are our chefs and our end customers. And so and that's why it takes us so long, because we're a little bit of perfectionists internally as well. We're like, until it's not perfect, until it doesn't delight us, we're not going to give it to anyone. And then,
well, not to mention that you talk about price parity. So having exotic ostrich, very, very, very expensive. But here you can have exotic ostrich or exotic lamb or wild bred lamb, or however you're doing the flavor profiles at any restaurant for the same that you would do chicken. Or, or maybe not chicken yet. Maybe you're not at price parity with chicken yet. But, as you get into the realm of a reasonable cost of food, you don't have that for any exotic animal. And so already there's a price parity here, or close to price parity, or actually beating. What am I talking about? Good thing. Yes.
You're destroying our margins. Let's not go down this path. Let's pull back.
Well, no. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yes. Okay, well, I want to see Black Sheep Foods go the route of exotic. I think that would be very interesting. But let's not leave the realm of lamb.
Let's, even though it's the same but a different paint job, let's keep it different. So
Well, it is different because there's no exotic animals out there, really.
There we
so
go.
you got okay, good. That's what you want to hear. Okay, got it. I got it.
Hearing, and
so as we wrap up today, we would be remiss if we just really didn't give people the lowdown on how much better plant-based lamb is for the planet than animal lamb. So people have their minds wrapped around, I think, beef, and that cows, 37% of all humanly induced methane comes from cows alone. I get this from the United Nations. All animal agriculture adding to 14.5% of greenhouse gases in general. That's from animal gases, as well as it's from deforesting and growing crops for 80 billion animals, 10 times more animals on the planet than people. And then also all that cost of transportation, moving heavy items like live and dead animals around. These contribute to emissions through the transportation. So you've got this big, unwieldy yet fragile supply chain that is detrimental for the planet. Let's talk about just how bad lambs are in comparison to cows, if you could. And then, of course, plant-based, how much better.
Yeah, so they're on par in terms of how destructive they are with regards to CO2 and water. So it's about, per pound of lamb, about 350 liters of water, 14.5 or 15 kgs of CO2. But in terms of the acreage, it's 0.04 acres per pound. So it's just on the land mass side, they're a lot worse. Reason being, you can sort of domesticate them. It has been done, but typically they're free to graze, and so they travel around a lot. So the amount of land that they use is just a lot more. And actually, what you've been seeing from Australia and New Zealand, the story of lamb and sheep and goats sort of becomes a story of water and land.
Yes.
And water and land are kind of intertwined as well. Not kind of, they are intertwined. And so actually, you know how they say, New Zealand has more sheep than people. It's still true, but in the 90s it was 33-1, and now it's 22-1. And so what you're seeing is, as these places, and by the way, global sort of temperatures are rising, global water, surface water levels are falling. So what you're seeing is, as sort of these things become more prevalent around the world, that animals such as the goats and the lambs that need the space and like topsoil feeders, people are underinvesting in, and what they're replacing it, even in New Zealand and Australia, is with cattle. And the reason why they replace it with cattle is because you could send Iowa water or Brazilian water to, China or Australia or New Zealand, right? Because we say, hey, take our soybeans, which are water and like nutrients, take them from Iowa or the Midwest or Brazil, and you could feed your livestock. And it's much easier to do that with the porks, chickens, and beefs of the world. Whereas if you need something that needs to forage, you have to have the water and nutrients sort of on site. And so what we're also noticing in terms of like prices have skyrocketed way more for, I think they're double the highest. Beef is, in terms of pricing, beef has gone up from the 1990s about 200% or 250% inflation. Lamb is like 400 something percent inflation. And it's because people are realizing, like, I don't want to be in this business. Like, I cannot outsource the water production. They take too much time grazing. It's just not worth it. The minute a drought happens, I have to cull my herd. Droughts happen more and more frequently. Why bother, right? And so they're saying, well, why don't we just do cattle? Like, it just becomes like, why don't we just continue doing beef? And so they're switching over.
This always amazes me, though, at humanity's inability to learn. Beef isn't going to, it's like just a Band-Aid at best. It's a Band-Aid that doesn't even like reach to the other side of the scab. It's so short term.
It shows them, but I'm not defending them, but like that's what they know.
Yes, okay, yeah, and we do what we know.
Everybody does. We know. They're like,
if
I'm doing ruminants and this one's like walking around, I'll take the one that just stands still. And
yes, I guess. Yes,
I'll buy soybeans from America, like every other farmer does.
Yeah, they'll retrofit to do the next simple step. But ultimately, I think beef is going to have the same issues that lamb is having. There's not enough land. There's not enough water. You're going to have to go to the next level down in terms of resource utilization. And ultimately, we'll get to plant-based. So with that, I'll ask you as we kind of round up, what are your predictions? I used to ask this question like the next 10 years, but now things are moving so quickly. I'll say the next 3 years. What are your predictions? And I'll let that be anything, either the plant-based business world or politics. You just say, what are your predictions? What's going to go down in the next 3 years?
Politics. Ooh,
I don't know. You don't have to talk about politics.
But today's not a good day to talk about politics. A lot of bad news has come out, or good news, depending on what side you're on. Well,
yeah, I guess, right? Yeah.
Sides of the story. I think going back to innovation, and I said this before, but I think the key thing here is the consumer is not a monolith. Industrial agriculture treats consumers as monolith because it has to be a monolith, right? It could only pump out chickens. It could only make them bigger.
Yes.
It could only make them cheaper relatively. Now it's accelerating actually because of the water and land usage and yada, yada, yada. But the customer is not a monolith. And so I think what you're already seeing is brands that are catering to customer needs that are unique. And what will happen is, I think when we first started, we were thinking like, oh, there's going to be one or two players. One's going to win beef. One's going to win chicken. It's going to be an analogous situation to what happened in animal agriculture. What you're seeing now is there's going to be a great bifurcation, and there's going to be consolidation in certain animals because they're going to be sort of like the base capacity, and people will still eat a certain amount of chicken nuggets per se. But you're going to start seeing things that are catering to you, right? If you want whole foods and you want a burger, there's going to be a company for that. If you want high levels of proteins and maybe omega-3s from your chicken alternatives, you'll get that, right? So now you could eat like a thing that's supposed to be technically bad for you, and you're putting a bunch of ketchup on anyway, and now it's giving you like heart-healthy omega-3s. And if you're really a health nut, you're going to really align with this brand that's like, I'll give you like a vitamin pill, but with a protein mass or wrapping around it. So I think there's going to be a bifurcation in the future. and it's going to be what always wins, which is what does my customer need, right? I'm 38 now. Like, I want more vitamins in my diet and I want more fiber. Give me a plant-based alternative that gives me both those things and maybe some nutrient that I don't typically get. And that's what I want, which it redefines protein, because it's not actually protein anymore. It's what do I think is center of plate? And that's there's so much creativity to be had there, which I get excited about, right? Like,
Yeah.
I get excited about my taste and stuff, because I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is camel?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it is just a creative maze. I mean, there's so many ways to go. You talk about health, and now foods can deliver health as, a delivery mechanism for your vitamins, for your omega-3s, and in other ways that we didn't think of food, and we only thought of vitamins and supplements and all this. And then the creativity of, do I want whole food plant-based, or I just want whole food and I'll make the shape myself? Do I want it to be junk food? Do I want it to deliver a healthy profile of,
What if it regenerates the planet? Like, what if it only uses ingredients that if you eat it, you're actively, like, it's not even monoculture is way better than animal protein. But then what if you were like next level up, where you're like, hey, the younger generation really cares about the environment. What if you had a product that when you ate it, you could be guaranteed that, like, the world is getting better? Like,
yeah.
So and that's a 33%. So we know the numbers, right? That's about 30 to 40% of people really care about that. Well, guess what? That times 9 billion, that's a lot of goddamn people. And so right now it's like, oh yeah, 34%. But if you had, 2 to 3 billion people actively eating something that made the environment better, well, that makes up for the other parts. So, like, I just want monoculture and flavorings, right? And that's what we're going after. So it's like 1,000 flowers blooming, to quote Mao, weirdly to end it, maybe, but that's what I think the future holds. It's going to be like this burst of creativity, because we're past the first level, right? It's the analogs have come out, people are familiar. Now it's like, do you want this? Do you want this?
Yes. Now the real trust begins, because the big guys, Beyond Meat and Impossible, have kind of laid the tracks for what we're doing and why, and it's all good stuff. And now you get to really take the bike out for a spin. Okay, a couple extra questions as we round up here. We could go on for a long time together. Quick answers. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
I think so I was a product manager then, and I did things maybe a little abrasively. So it was leadership. I think leadership is about how do you motivate people without motivating people. I don't know if that sounds, so it's just it's the soft, it's hard to describe, but I think it's the soft power of, like, motivating people towards a cause, right? So I think I didn't realize that I was using a lot of, like, techniques that I don't think were good, but it got the job done. And now it's more, how do you inspire people in a different manner? So it's a catch-all. I don't know. It's about doing leadership better.
Well, it's interesting. I went to a conference recently, and oh boy, they asked this question about leadership. What did leadership mean to you? And everyone had an awful answer. Being inclusive of my team and respecting people's hours. And I was like, yeah, definitely, sure. But that's the nuts and bolts of it. Real leadership comes from passion around vision. If you can't explain to people why they should get on board in a passionate way with the vision, because it means something to them, you will never have real leadership, because ultimately the work has to be meaningful. And if people can't understand how it is meaningful work, if they don't see the vision and the passion, it doesn't matter if you, like, respect their 9 to 5. I mean, it's just, yes, of course you do that. That's sort of like the nuts and bolts of it, but it's lacking the real inspiration, and people don't really follow without inspiration.
It's like the Groucho Marx saying, it's like porn, you'll know it when you see it, sort of thing, where it's you don't, like, I think leadership, people think it's something that you could learn from a book, and there's parts and things that you can, but, like, openness, communication, how you communicate, because everyone's different as well, and there's no one size fits all leadership, right? You don't come in and you're like, oh, this is one size fits all. It's more about the relating to people on what they think is important. And some people here are motivated by the science. Some people are motivated by the mission. Some people are motivated by, money, and that's like, all those things are fine. And
you just whatever it is, find a way to communicate the vision to them
I'm going to be honest with
on
you.
their terms.
Exactly. I'm going to be honest with you, and we could do this, and it's actually a really big thing, and we're going to do something no one's ever done, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be hard. There you go. That's all I got. That's all you do after this. If you don't want to stay, get the hell out of here.
Oh my gosh, this spoken from the man who was a product manager, but before that or after that, who knows, he was also a stand-up comedian. I don't know if you guys have gotten that in this talk, but Sonny did some time in the stand-up.
An opportunity here.
Oh my gosh. Okay, quickie questions. And this I really mean like one sentence answers. No, okay, what's your favorite snack?
Potato chips. Yeah,
Any flavor?
Barbecue. Oh, I love barbecue.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, and you're having a bad day. Things are not going your way. What is the phrase you tell yourself to get yourself back in the game?
Phrase? No, I make a joke or two. So I'll go to really nihilism, and everything's gonna end anyway. What's it matter? And it just resets everything, kind of brings you back to reality.
Yeah, it gives you a different perspective. Like, it's not really that bad. Yeah.
It's really not that bad. I could be dead.
Yes, right. So here we are, most definitely alive today. We were live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Thank you, everybody, for listening and staying in. I will see everybody next Tuesday. But Sonny, you stay put. Don't go anywhere. Sonny, thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for Black Sheep Food. Everybody, blacksheepfoods.com. Get yourself some Black Sheep lamb. It's so tasty. It's so good. We were talking all about taste today, so now you got to taste it. So go ahead and do that. Sonny, don't go everywhere. Everybody else, thank you for all you do. Thank you for caring. Thank you for making a difference. Thank you for seeing the vision and getting behind it with your passion. I do love you, everybody. I will see you next week.